Hello Instagram, it's Beto here, your daily divinity coach. This is the first series of my new series, which is called Sunday Weekly Live. And I'll be discussing current topics and how they relate to manifesting three things. Manifesting justice, manifesting abundance, and manifesting immortality. So I thank you for joining live. I will also record this and post this, so if you want to review it, that'll be great. And I know I had quite a few people get back to me and said they couldn't make this live event, but they'd be watching the tape of it, so that's exciting. But what I wanted to do for today's topic is talk about what's happening now with the movement for social justice, namely racial justice that's taking place in the wake of the murder, the heinous and tragic murder of George Floyd there in Minneapolis, as well as Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and others that have come to the surface. So I want to take some time to talk about that, and I wanted to do it in a storytelling way. So just this Friday evening, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine, and we were talking about what's going on with Black Lives Matters. And so I relayed a story. I was actually down in Boston at a protest and march last Sunday, and I'm going to go ahead and take these glasses off. I was there last Sunday at a protest and march, and the first person who spoke was a young man, and he started talking about how he's a teacher in the Boston public school system, and it just really shocked me back actually to 1992. In 1992, I was fresh out of college. It was my first year of teaching. I was in the public school system, a high school teacher in the inner city, and that's when the Rodney King riots took place in Los Angeles as a result of the verdict. So Rodney King was one of the first instances, if not the first instance, when we had videotape evidence of police brutality. And so it took a little over a year for the trial and the verdict in that case, where 4 officers were charged with beating Rodney King. It was a brutal beating. The tape evidence is still out there if you wanted to view it. There's also, I was actually just reviewing the documentary 1992 about the Rodney King beating and the verdict. And so I was just out of college, young teacher, just like the teacher who I heard spoke last Friday at the Black Lives Matter demonstration in Boston at City Hall. And I, along with my best friend Carlos, decided we wanted to do something. We weren't in LA, we're up in Northern California, so we organized quickly after the verdict came out a peaceful protest and march through our city. It wasn't thousands of people, but there's hundreds of people, so it wasn't as big as the march in Boston last Sunday. I believe it was at least 5,000 that I seen. It was probably closer to 6 or maybe even 7. But we had a few hundred people, and we marched and whatnot, and we spoke and all that kind of stuff. And but again, unfortunately, those police officers weren't convicted, and since then, I don't know of any case of where there's a conviction comes through. And so we're really praying and hoping that we get a conviction in this case. And I know that the people are out there organizing and working. I've been to multiple visuals as well as demonstrations, marches, protests, and they're happening all over the place, in the suburbs, in the exurbs, in the cities. And it's really the makeup of the people. I think we're really at a tipping point where we can see the majority of the people are recognizing now that we have a systemic problem with police brutality. And hopefully that we'll be able to move forward and work on some real reforms within the police department. I know the slogan with Black Lives Matters is defund the police. What that looks like on the ground or at the negotiating table, we're seeing different kinds of models come through. And nonetheless, there is conversations and negotiations taking place, not the least of which is in Minneapolis. So again, back to my story. So after the Rodney King verdict, Carlos and myself, we led a protest and march in our city, and then a few months later, we were approached by a group of young people to help them organize. They had a youth center in their town as a working poor part of our city, and these kids, they had a youth center where they're able to go and they're able to shoot pool and play ping pong and get help with their homework and get tutoring help. It was being sponsored by the Parks and Recreation Department. So all these good things to keep the kids from, the quote unquote streets, and be able to be in a safe place where there's adult supervision after school, and they can get help with their homework and have some recreation time and that type of thing. So we said, okay, sure. We already had this experience helping organize a march and a protest after the Rodney King verdicts there in '92, and it was the same calendar year. So we started working with these young people, and we started going out door to door in the community, walking, getting support from the community, and then we decided to do lead a march and whatnot, and have a protest. And unbeknownst to us, the police had heard about this, and they showed up, and they actually brutalized a couple of the protesters. There was no videotape evidence. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't know the police was gonna come. They never contacted us, and as a result, one of the young men, he ended up having to get a lawyer and file suit against the police department. What resulted from that for us, for Carlos and myself, is we got a call from the city. They wanted to negotiate with us. So we actually sat down with the city. The city manager came out, the head of Parks and Recreation came out, the head of the youth centers came out, and we had a negotiation. It was us two, and then we had two of the youth there with us. We presented our demands. There's some pushback, and then we reminded them of the impending case against the police department. So at the end, they pretty much acquiesced to all of our demands. And so we ended up, Carlos and I reopened the youth center, and we worked with the city for 3 years. So we actually got to know some police officers, and I'll be one to attest, even though I have issues with the systemic oppression and racism within the police department, not the least of which is the brutality, which I myself have marched against back in '92 and again now, is that there are a few cops out there, police officers who want to talk, who want to learn, who want to get better at their job. So I am optimistic and hopeful that change can come, however that change looks like. If it's radical in certain areas, I know there's some suburban places where radical change probably isn't necessary, but in certain cities it is, not the least of which is Minneapolis. So what that looks like at the ground, to be honest with you, I'm glad I'm not at that negotiating table. It's not fun. The sexy part is being out there in the street and marching and protesting and yelling those slogans. I mean, that's literally the sexy part. So my hat's off to those who continue to put the pressure on to create systemic change, and also for those who are at the negotiating table, really trying to lay out what that change looks like in real terms, in real dollars. So that was my experience, and I relayed that to my friend on Friday evening. Because we're talking about Black Lives Matters and the current topic that's going on right now, this fight for racial justice and against police brutality. She shared her story. She's been working quite a bit with Black Lives Matter. She organized an event here in the city, which went really well, actually brought out the media. She's also attended lots of visuals and marches, protests, demonstrations. So we had common things to talk about. We also went on and talked about other forms of social justice, economic justice, LGBTQ rights, the women's movement, so on and so forth, the fight for environmental justice. So we had a lot of common things to talk about there on Friday evening. So I used that as a jumping off point to begin to talk about manifesting immortality. And I said one of the key to manifesting immortality is justice, but not just social justice, because that's really the foundation and that's primary, but this idea that the meek shall inherit the earth. So she starts asking questions about manifesting immortality, and I said it's basically about ancient wisdom. And I said, for example, African culture, African American history didn't begin 400 years ago when African slaves were brought to America. It goes back way before that. And I said, and myself as a Mexican person living in the United States, or the Chicano as we prefer to be called, our history goes back way further than when the northern part of the United States was annexed back in the 19th century by the United States. It goes back way farther than that. It goes way back farther than when the Europeans, the Spanish, first landed there in Mexico. And so I started talking about our oral history, and let her know that, you know, a lot of our history now is oral, from that indigenous ancient wisdom that's been passed on orally, because our libraries burned for days when the Europeans came over. Our libraries literally burned for days. So I shared with her when I was a student activist in college, we would have people come and share that ancient wisdom with us, none the least of which was Andres Segura, who's known as El Maestro in Mexico City in DF, and he would teach us. You know, we were great scientists. We were a rather peaceful people, even though the history has been rewritten that we're a bloodthirsty people. We're actually a quite peaceful people. We're scientists. And not to say that there weren't thugs. As my divinity school professor would say, there's thugs in every culture. But we were rather a loving and peaceful family. We're scientists. We built one of, if not the most complex calendars the world has ever seen. You can't do that unless you're devoted to science and you have peace and order within your society. He shared with us that we're also not just astronomers, but astronauts. We actually were involved in space exploration long before the race to space between the US and the Soviet Union back when John F. Kennedy was president. And you can actually, there's evidence obviously of the calendar, so she was agreeable on that. She was a little doubtful on the space exploration, but she's willing to allow her thoughts to say, that might be possible. I think is how she termed it. That might be possible, that the ancient wisdom, the ancient culture of the Mexica Azteca, the ancient culture of the Mexicans, that we were actually exploring in space. And there is evidence in the hieroglyphics. If you study and read, you'll be able to find that there's actual examples in the hieroglyphics of how we were involved in space exploration. The next two points that I made, she was disagreeable, and that is that we were, as a people, we were also involved in brain surgeries and heart surgeries. She was not agreeable at all. She wanted evidence. I said that, this is oral history. There was evidence, but it was burned. This is the evidence is what I'm saying to you. It's oral history. I said, but if you apply logic, it would only make sense. If you're doing space exploration, right? If you built the most complex calendar the world had ever seen, why couldn't you be doing brain surgeries and heart surgeries? It just makes sense. I said, so again, she was disagreeable. I said, so this is my point when it comes to manifesting immortality, is the gateway to manifesting immortality is justice. Not just social justice, because that's primary, that's foundational, racial justice, environmental justice, etc., economic justice, but the higher justice, which is the divine justice, which is the meek shall inherit the earth. So when, having her be disagreeable toward our oral history, our ancient wisdom, is really a sign of white supremacy, of Eurocentrism. And that's what we all need to get beyond, is that we become so entrenched in Eurocentricity and white supremacy and white supremacist thought that we can't even give credence to another culture's oral history, especially ancient wisdom, which is what manifesting immortality is all about. It's all about ancient wisdom, also manifesting abundance and manifesting justice, which is what I talk about, the three themes that I always talk about, is that you have to have that meekness, that humility to be able to find that gateway to manifesting immortality. So again, breaking down white supremacist thought, breaking down Eurocentricity, not just in the moment, although that is key. We have to, break it down in the moment in regards to police brutality, in regards to keeping the pressure on to secure convictions against Derek Chauvin and the other three officers involved in the brutal, heinous, tragic killing and murder of George Floyd, as well as justice for Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the others. That's key, that's foundational, but also this idea of breaking down white supremacist thought, breaking down Eurocentricity, so that we can access that ancient wisdom, so that we can find and move through that portal, that gateway to manifesting immortality. So that's what I wanted to share with you all today. Again, this is my first episode of my live series here on Instagram chat. I'm also going to be doing another one talking about the same theme today on Facebook Live. So I'm going to be doing Instagram chat every Sunday at 11 a.m. Again, the series is called Sunday Weekly Revival, and then I'll be doing it again half hour later, 11:30 a.m. on the East Coast. Pacific time, it's 8 a.m. Instagram, 8:30 Facebook Live. So in the future, if you have questions, please send those questions over so that I can work with those questions, come up with some answers, and deliver those questions live. I can also do that via direct message as well. I've had people reach out for some individual coaching or just to have some individual questions answered. More than happy to do that also over direct message, or we can set a time to talk on the phone. I've done that a couple times. And I also wanted to leave you with this. If you haven't already reached out to me in regards to bracelets, I do give away bracelets. I have a set of 3 bracelets. I give them out as 3 because they're meant to be worn as 3, although that's not a hard rule. You can split it up and wear 1 or 2 if you like, but they're meant to be worn as 3. And there's a gray one that says Manifest Justice, and we just talked about that. There's the blue one that reads Manifest Abundance. And I can just say a couple words about this. We can talk about this more at a later date. But Manifest Abundance, the primary foundational piece to manifesting abundance is the law of attraction, which is obviously very popular. A lot of people have heard about it now. I was actually introduced to the law of attraction as a young boy. I believe I was 10, maybe 11 years old when my mom started teaching me about the law of attraction. She called it speaking your wishes and desires into existence. So I was schooled in the law of attraction since I was a kid. So the higher meaning though of the law of attraction is this idea of us living in harmony with each other and living in harmony with nature. And then that's how we achieve that peace that surpasseth all understanding, which is that ancient wisdom that I speak to. So again, living in harmony with each other and with nature, and then achieving that peace that surpasseth all understanding. And then the last bracelet here, this one's in black, and it reads Manifest Immortality. And this is the idea that it's really twofold. The primary foundational piece is the idea of manifesting youthfulness. So stopping or reversing aging, the aging process. And then there's the higher piece, which is actually the literal meaning of manifesting immortality is that death is unnecessary, that it's an untruth, and the truth is that we are created in the image of the divine, and that divine is life, meaning we are life. So for example, the great teacher, who some prefer to call the Messiah, others the prophet or the great prophet, this man from Nazareth, known by the name of Jesus, again, I prefer to call him the great teacher. He manifested immortality when he died, but only temporarily, came back to life, and then ascended to heaven alive. Now, he was not the only one to ascend to heaven alive. We have other ancient texts that gives examples of individuals who manifested immortality by ascending to heaven alive in their physical bodies. The Old Testament, the Hebrew text, has examples, 8 examples. The Quran, Muhammad actually ascended to heaven alive, although temporarily he did end up dying a physical death. But temporarily he ascended to heaven alive. And within Jainism, their religion in India, there's many examples of spiritual leaders who actually lived millenniums and then ascended to heaven alive. So that's manifest immortality. So I have these 3 bands that I give out, and they're given out as a set, and again, meant to be worn together, but doesn't have to be. And unfortunately, and it breaks my heart, but the cost of shipping right now outside of the U.S., especially in light of COVID-19, is cost prohibitive. I sponsored this giveaway myself. And so right now I'm just shipping within the U.S., although I have had a few people in Europe and Canada Mexico who really wanted it, and so I made an exception. So if you are in a place where we can ship and it's not too costly, I can make an exception for you. But unfortunately, I have a lot of followers in, not unfortunately, fortunately have a lot of followers in India. Unfortunately, the cost to be able to ship to India is extraordinary right now. USPS isn't shipping right now, as a matter of fact. So unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. And there's other places where I can't do that. But anyhow, if you really want to ban, if you live in the U.S., bans are free, shipping's free. If you live outside the U.S., I could make a special case depending on where you live. Just direct message me. So I thank you for the time. I thank you that you're able to participate live. And again, I'm going to save this recording and it will be posted so you can see it again or share it with your friends. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and put my glasses on and end this now. If you have any questions, go ahead and direct message me. But again, thank you very much for attending my very first session of my new series, Sunday Weekly Revival. Thank you. Bye-bye.